Before we dive deep today, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy learning about history. It's just a simple click that helps us bring a lot more fascinating stories your way. What if I told you there was once a method of execution so terrifying, so brutal, that even its very mention could silence a room? In ancient China, death by sawing wasn't just a punishment, it was a symbol of power and fear. This is the story of one of history's darkest secrets. Death by sawing is just as horrific as it sounds. It was a very, very ancient form of execution in ancient China, wherein a person's body was split, sometimes vertically from head to toe, or horizontally at the waist, using nothing but a hand-operated saw. Cold, metallic teeth into flesh, the slow grind as the saw tears through bone and sinew, screams ringing in the air. This was a process so devised as to kill, and at the same time prolonging the sufferings for as long as possible. It wasn't quick, neither was it merciful. This is death in most extreme agony. But for such brutality, why? It could be traced to the culture and politics of that period. The reason was purely public, sawing as a spectacular sport of some kind, serving the needs of muscle flexing for the then rulers. A clear message to disobey the law or the throne, and this would probably be the consequence awaiting them. In short, death by sawing was by no means particular with the Chinese, seeing parallel methods used in Europe, Middle East, and Asia as well. However, it attained some notorious degree in China in periods of political turbulences. Tradition says it had attained its heights in Han and Tang dynasties, although dates can ill be ascertained because accounts vary. It was never a punishment for murderers or thieves, often being reserved for rebels, traitors, or people accused of treason. In other words, people who threatened the ruling elite. Actually, the process was one of psychological weaponry to instill fear and suppress dissent. Even more chilling was the very public nature of executions. Crowds gathered, though not necessarily due to any interest in blood. Attendance was generally compulsory. Events like this served to reaffirm the strength of the state by publicly making an example of the condemned. But here is the kicker. If, as often as the legends maintain, how often does the death by sawing actually happen? While described in historical texts detailing this method, some historians feel it might have been exaggerated in use for propaganda or to terrorize individuals into being obedient. Why? Because terror itself is such a powerful weapon. The very thought of being sawn alive so thoroughly terrified anyone by its very idea and view that very often rulers never had to apply it, as the reputation for such cruelty itself had an after effect. That obliges us, vice versa, to put before ourselves this other parallel question. How much does the historical record represent fact? How much has been hewn into control, manipulated, or terrorized? Up until now, fear remains among the effective weapons of conservation of power. The story of the death by sawing is not a story about ancient cruelties. It's a fable about the human condition, a tale of how fear gets weaponized, power corrupted, and how civilizations employ violence to come to an end. But it does remind us of something more fundamental, that of questioning authority, standing up to injustice, and remembering what human life is worth. Methods of control may change over centuries, but the lesson remains the same. We are living in a world which is still fighting the forces of oppression. History reminds us of the darkness in humanity's deeds, but also hands us the tools with which to forge a better future. A future wherein justice, compassion, and courage can be paramount. What do you think of this terrible way of execution? Do you feel that fear plays a part today in keeping individuals in check? Share below. I'd love to hear your perspective.